This is another episode of Chris and Rick Talk Guitars. This is Chris over here.
Hello.
I'm Rick. And Chris had a great title for this episode. Chris, what was it again?
Oh, the title is Gibson and Fender, The Dark Era.
Yeah.
Which is the CBS and the Norlan eras,
Yes.
respectively.
Yep. Notorious eras for guitars. Well, why don't you get us started on I think to start off, our beef with people who complain about these eras is, yes, we all know the change that occurred and the bean counter mentality that overtook these companies, but there are a lot of people out there that just write all the instruments off from these eras, right? Like, don't buy anything from a 70s, Fender or Gibson. They suck, right?
Right. Which I believe, people are starting to come around and starting to see the value and, the quality of these instruments.
Yeah.
But there's still, you'll run into a lot of times, don't buy a 70s Fender guitar. The quality is horrible.
Yeah.
Or, the same with Gibson. And for Fender, I believe it was December of 1965 is when Leo Fender sold to the Columbia Broadcasting, whatever the fuck they're called, the CBS. And so 66 would have marked the first year of CBS era for those instruments. And, anybody who's ever played some 66 instruments knows that they're pretty fucking great.
Yeah, I know.
And Norlan, I believe that was 1970, I think is when...
And some people actually they think it goes back to when McCarty quit in 66 and that started the ball rolling. But I think everything I've read is like 70 to 83.
As far as the company's takeover.
Exactly.
The large company
70
takeover.
to 83 was the Norlan era, kind of.
No, you're right. And,
of course I am.
So what are we talking about? I mean...
Well, we're talking about basically the fact that there are great guitars from that era, those eras of guitars from Fender and Gibson. I mean...
Absolutely. I think what I take issue with is kind of the statement that, don't buy an instrument from that era.
Right.
The quality is bad.
Yeah.
They have poor quality control during that era. Because to me, quality control is something that you can measure. It's measurable. Yeah. You have to be able to point to an instrument and say, look at this. This is horrible. This is bad quality. Like, take Gibson. Gibson, at some point during this time, went to 3-piece maple necks.
Yep.
And it's completely valid to say, on a Gibson Les Paul, I do not like 3-piece maple necks. I prefer 1-piece mahogany, and that's completely valid. But you can't say that 3-piece maple neck is a quality issue.
Right, like it's lesser quality. Yeah.
Right. It's just how is it implemented? Yeah. Is it good? Is the angle of the neck correct?
Exactly.
Is the pitch of the headstock correct? Is everything line up and it plays great? Because those necks, those 3-piece maple necks, are very high quality, and a lot of them.
Yeah, and like the volute, like people bitched about the volute too, which is essentially an engineering answer to the problem of broken headstocks on these Gibson, which is notorious for Gibson guitars, right? Because the angle of the... It
is notorious, but that's another thing, and I would just jump to an A side really quickly, is
Go for it.
That the broken headstock is an issue. There's an engineering problem. There's a physical reason that this happens, but it's completely overblown on the internet. If you talk to, you'll hear people that say, "Don't buy a Gibson; those headstocks fall off." If you look at them,
exactly.
It's like, no, you have to drop them. I mean, you have to drop them in a way they have to fall over and hit a certain way, and they'll break because it's a weak stress point in that guitar. I mean, I've been around Gibson guitars 1,000 years, I think, going this November. But I've seen the ratio of broken headstock guitars is about what you would think they would be. There's a number of them, but it's not like every third guitar has a broken headstock.
No.
It is a weak point and something to be made aware of, but you'll see that the most desirable Gibson by far is the 50 style that has the weak point. I mean, the volute didn't fly, as you were saying.
Right.
A lot of people didn't dig it, and it did help out in a specific problem that it chose to address.
And like you say, maybe a sticker on the case that says "Don't drop your guitar" might be a better way to go.
I think it would. Just keep away from drummer.
Keep away from the drummer.
So that's one area. Let's talk about Fender first, and then we'll jump back to Gibson.
Sure.
Fender, the things that they did that were so looked down upon were probably the 3-bolt neck is a big one. The 3-bolt neck plate. Actually, somebody sat down and thought that out. There was an engineer that sat down and thought that out, and it introduced the micro tilt. As a design, it was great. It was completely there's nothing wrong with that design at all. It did exactly what the designer wanted. The problem arose, and there were specific problems, is the people cutting the bodies and making a sloppy neck pocket, this is one of the things you can point to in a Fender guitar and say, this is horrible quality control right here. Why is there a gap on each side of this neck? And with a 3-bolt system, or even a 4-bolt system, if you have enough gap there, you're going to have stability problems. You're going to be able to move that neck. And so that is one of the things that you can point to. And my point and the point of this episode is how many in that era do you find? You will find them. Yeah. But not to the extent that people would have you believe.
Exactly. And I have a 70s Strat, and it's got the 3-bolt neck. And I've never... And the pocket, I think, as I recall, it's pretty tight. You've seen that guitar. It's an Antigua. And yeah, I've never had tuning problems with that guitar or felt like the neck was not stabilized less.
Or aligned. You didn't have a string fall
No, I
off
haven't.
All right.
And so, and again, you and I have both played a bunch of 70s Strats that have come through guitar shops that we frequent all the time, and we've played some great Strats from those eras, you know? And exactly, to your point, you know, if you want to talk about preference, that's one thing. But if you want to talk about quality, okay, let's take this guitar and look at it and see and measure quality, right? Rather than just say, oh, well, I don't like 3-bolt necks but you know, like to your point, people have said, oh, yeah, 3-bolt necks, they won't stay in tune like 4-bolt necks or something, or you know, there's some issue, right? And which is complete BS. It's like, no.
It's physically impossible. Yeah. It's the neck pocket. It comes down to there. And another thing in the 70s that, you know, kind of popped up late 60s and 70s is the finishes changed. They got a lot thicker. It was like a polyester or some poly-based finish. And that's something where, you know, it's valid for someone to say, I don't like those really thick finishes. I happen to not mind them on Fenders because what we should say here is I'm going to have a bias because of my nostalgic factor. With all old instruments, there's a nostalgia factor. Yeah. So when I started playing guitar, these were the guitars that were available. I would go into the music store and I would just go nuts over. Right. So for me, a Fender that has a thicker finish doesn't really bother me for that reason, because it feels like a Fender should, because that's what I learned on and what was available.
Well, I mean, we're the same age, so I totally relate to the fact of seeing these guitars from our era as new guitars, right? Even with the thick finishes and all that other stuff. So same on the neck, same thing. And I'm the same way. It doesn't bother me either. Like, you know, I love the old nitrocellulose finishes on old guitars. They're beautiful, and the way they age and crack is awesome and stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, I'll take the 1,000 coats of polyurethane on my Antigua any day.
My bowling ball.
My bowling ball.
Oh, the thing I was going to point out is another personal point for a guitar that a lot of people poo-poo is the 7 1/4 radius on the necks, which Fender eventually upgraded on all the standard.
Right.
I think that for me personally, a Fender with a 7 1/4 radius is perfect. That feels so right to me. That feels like a Fender should feel.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is not any sort of a flaw that needed to be fixed. But I understand players' tastes have changed. And now I think if you polled a number of players, they're going to say, I need a flatter fretboard so I can do the blues. So...
then get your Valley Arts guitar.
But that, again, that is not quality. That is...
Exactly. That's preference.
Exactly.
And so, citing like neck radius or any of this other stuff as like quality issues, is dumb. It's dumb. It's not. It's a preference of a player. And like you're saying, it's like we talk about this all the time, where you know people will rail on a Telly or a Strat for things that are indicative of that particular guitar, right? It's like you buy a Strat for a certain reason. It's got a certain neck radius. It's got 3 pickup configuration. This is what the guitar is. So if you like a Strat, get a Strat. But don't get a Strat and then go, you know, I had my tech, you know, change the radius on the fretboard to... I mean, you can do this, but why not just go get a different guitar that does what you want it to do, you know? Rather than putting humbuckers in your Strat and flattening the neck radius, why don't you go get a guitar that...
Right, and there's plenty of it available. You know? And jumping back really briefly to the 3-bolt neck system, it's really interesting to note that when Leo Fender left Fender, he started, first the Music Man and then the G&L companies, and he used a 3-bolt system.
No.
Yeah, and my interesting point that I was getting to is that in 1997, the company G&L at the time decided to change to a 4-bolt system because of people's perceptions that the 3-bolt was bad. So, I mean, there's all these Music Man and G&L guitars with 3-bolt necks, and they're great, and there's nobody complaining about it, but the stigma of the 3-bolt neck.
How stupid.
Right.
And, if it's good enough for Leo, it's good enough for me, man. 3 bolts are good enough for Leo. Damn it.
Fender.
So they caved to the pressure. That sucks, man.
Yeah, that does suck.
3-bolt forever.
Let's hop over to Gibson for a moment.
Let's hop over to Gibson.
So what if it was their dark, like, points that people...
You were talking about weight, especially for Les Pauls and stuff.
Yes.
You had an interesting point about the average weight from the golden era versus the Norlan era, and you said it was pretty marginal, really, like a pound.
It's a pound, and a pound is a lot in a guitar. But it's not as much as you would think. And yes, it's true that during this, the 70s primarily, the weights of the guitars went up considerably. They were using, heavier wood. Yeah. And a couple of things to note about that is during that time, the thought as far as tone went is that heavier guitars provided more sustain and were better. They were actually high-end boutique companies like Kramer and whatnot, like the early Kramer, not the later bolt-on Kramer.
The 20-pound Kramer.
But like the Travis Bean and Kramer, where they specifically sought wood that was heavy to make heavy guitars because of the sustain factor. So that may have been part of it, but there are a lot of heavy guitars in there, and everybody has to choose for themselves how much weight can you take.
Sure.
I have 11-pound Les Paul over there, and that's about, I don't have any problems with that guitar. I've done 2-hour plus rehearsals, and it's never bothered me. But everybody, I think, probably has the limit that, okay, this guitar speaks to me, but, at 14 pounds, it's like myelin. I don't know. At 14 pounds is a heavy guitar.
Yeah, and I understand, like, to some degree that, but again, we've talked about this. It's like a Les Paul in general is a heavy guitar, right?
Because it's
a big hunk of mahogany, and it's just the construction style of that guitar. It's going to be a heavy guitar, and so if you like a Les Paul, maybe you can find one that's some kind of light. But for me, it's like, I don't know. I guess I'm just not that picky in terms of. I mean, I wouldn't want to strap on this 20-pound guitar and have to play it for 3 hours a night, but a Les Paul is a heavy guitar. I know that going into it, right? So,
but getting back to the weight thing that we're talking about now, but I'm trying to, before I lose these numbers, some research I did online, I found one of the sources of the research was the Beauty of the Burst book, which averaged a bunch of weights from a number of the actual 59 and 60 bursts, and they averaged out to just under 9 pounds. It was like in the mid to high 8 range, and with the 70s Les Pauls, I found a source that claimed they're around 10 pounds, which is a pound heavier. A pound is a lot in a guitar, but it's not like ridiculous to the point of where you would think that every single Les Paul is going to be super heavy. I've played hundreds of them probably in the last since the 80s. I try to pick up and at least play as many of any Les Paul, 50s, whatever, and I've come across a handful maybe that were like, oh my God, this is a boat anchor, like 14 pounds. They're out there, and how many I do not know. But going back to the whole quality thing, I don't know where you'd lump that in quality-wise. I mean, the wood is heavier wood a quality issue? It's like we can get this wood cheaper, we can make these guitars, or was it part of this is more desirable because it gives more sustain? Right. That's one thing that's easy to tell when you're looking for a guitar. Pick it up, and if it's too heavy for you, that's not the guitar for me.
Have it chambered,
right.
Take it to...
Well, that's what I would rather have a guitar on the heavier side than having like a chambered guitar.
Yeah, talking about weight, or just the quality issues. Let's talk about some of the stuff we've come across in terms of people bad-mouthing the Norlan era in terms of pancake bodies, multiple plies of wood, or multiple pieces of maple even on the tops and all this stuff, and how a lot of people kind of claim that that's poor quality when it's really not. It's just like you have this material, you're using it to the best of your ability. I've seen and played a lot of 70s Les Pauls and Gibsons, and a lot of them have been great guitars.
Oh yeah,
and I love them. Like I said, I keep referring to this Gold Top Deluxe that my buddy had back in the 70s, and it's one of the coolest guitars I've ever played to this day. It's just and he had the mini humbuckers in the Deluxe, right? Which again, people badmouth these mini humbuckers, but That's one of the coolest guitars I played, and it sounded amazing. Right. Which is a great guitar.
No, and isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah.
So the Norlan era, things you can actually see and point to and go, look at this. This is shit quality.
Yeah.
I've noticed a number of, like, some of their lower end guitars, when they started doing bolt neck guitars, like Marauders and S1s, and, you know, that had, like, really big neck gaps. I don't know how dialed in they were when they started churning out their bolt-ons, but they're some of the biggest neck pocket issues I've ever seen, as far as, like, I can stick a deck of cards in this thing. So that's something very measurable. You can go, this quality sucks.
Yep.
And you can't argue with that. It does. The pancake body, interestingly enough, was pre-Norlan takeover. They came out with that, like, a couple years, I think, before, or at least a year before Norlan kicked in.
And people still refer to that as some kind of shitty thing, right?
Right. Well, you know, I could see how it's undesirable. You want nice wood, but the guitars still sound good and play good. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah. I don't have a problem with three-piece maple necks. It's, you know, it's what does the guitar sound like? How does it feel? Yeah. I mean, finishes, Gibson has always, in my opinion, been really good with their finishes. I love their finishes. They've always used nitro, and it always feels really good. It ages really nice. You know, I'm trying to think of anything else that someone could point to and say, the quality, this is bad quality.
Even the pickups are cool, like the T-tops from the 70s. I think are great pickups, too.
And the mini humbuckers you mentioned, they're not for everybody. They're definitely, they have their own sound, and they're not going to please everybody, but there's absolutely not one quality issue.
Thin Lizzy.
Right, yeah.
Come on.
Fucking Scott Gorham, he liked them, right?
And they sound great.
Yeah.
And again, like I just, people who, you know, I read on some of the forums, people, you know, get a Les Paul Deluxe, and the first thing I do is take the mini humbuckers out and throw them in the trash, and then put P90s in it. Okay, that's fine.
Well, I can see putting P90s, but
yeah, me too.
I would put them in the case.
Exactly.
The other ones in the
Gently
case.
in the case, not in the garbage can. Yes.
In plastic. Put a rubber band around them.
Because I'm kind of partial to mini humbuckers. I think they sound cool, you know, but
they do. I've heard them sound really good in like a 70s Fender amp with it, like crank. They do it. They have a little bit different way that they compress. That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
They kind of cry.
Yeah.
Like
they cry.
Bluesy cry.
Bluesy cry.
No, I've never owned any, but I've played them. I'm such a P90 person. If I had a deluxe, I would probably do the swap.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Yeah, and P90s are great pickups. But so, I guess Chris and I just think that these eras of guitars get a bad rap, and I just don't think it's fair. I think more and more as we see comments on forums and things like that, people are starting to come around, or the people that think like us are surfacing, you know, right? Like,
or they've always been there and they're just they're more.
Yeah.
There's like a popular Les Paul forum that has a whole Norlan subcategory, and there's plenty of people out there, so people get it. There's, you know, I will say this about both the CBS era Fender and the Norlan era Gibson. I can, like, let's take Fender. I can find 20 good 70s Strat for every one, like, good. Am I even saying this right? No, let me make it easier. I would take a 70s Stratocaster over any American standard Stratocaster made from the mid 80s, all the way up through the 90s. I think finally they started changing things, but even then, you know, you have a 9 1/4 or 9 1/2, whatever the 9 point whatever radius neck. It's a flatter neck. I would take a 7 1/4.
I agree.
On a Strat over that, just because it feels like more of a Strat to me. Yeah. And I think the quality wise, as long as you get one that, you know, doesn't have a perceived quality issue, like, look, that neck, I can move the neck. There's a shitty neck pocket. I mean, it's way easier for me to find guitars I could bond with from that era than that. I think the dark period for Fender was just the post CBS, setting aside the vintage reissue, which I think is great, that whole vintage reissue. I think with, like, the American Standard Series, the Strat and the Tele, that I don't like any of those.
I agree.
I mean, the quality's not bad on them. They, like, refined them so much that they took the soul out of them, for me, anyway.
I think you're right. They morphed them into something that really isn't a Strat or a Tele anymore. It's like, it's this other guitar. It may as well be another model, really.
Right. The pickups in there, I don't like the pickups. I hate the bridges. Like that Bon Marché cliche, like those flat, I think Leo Fender got it right,
Yeah, I think so too, man. And I understand these companies needing to, I don't know. We talk about Martin. Martin kind of did a good job, I think, of maintaining their integrity over the years and retaining the integrity of their model catalog, right? The model of guitars they had without trying to create or without trying to morph these models into something to please some guy that doesn't like the characteristics of the guitar he supposedly likes, right? It's like,
no, and it's interesting because Martin had a dark period that paralleled those two periods too, and what their deal was. The late 60s and the 70s, their deal was a lot of their templates and whatnot, they kind of wore out.
Right.
So, like, their bridges on some of those guitars are off by as much as an eighth of an inch. And, like, the headstocks, if you look at that era, headstocks, they're a lot more rounded on the edges.
Right.
It's because their stuff wore out.
Interesting.
And so I guess the 70s, everybody was really high or something. Just like, whatever, dude.
There was
we got to make
a lot of shitty homegrown that was,
Totally. And so everybody was having issues. But given that, there are billions of
guitars and billions
that you can find from there. And my whole point to take away from any of this is don't write it off and, buy. It sucks. I wish people hated them more, actually, if you think about it, because the prices of these instruments are going way up.
Well, the vintage market. Yeah, pretty soon we're going to be seeing vintage 80s and 90s guitars like...
Totally.
Ibanez. The vintage Ibanez...
Well, there's already a
vintage.
huge... My God. You don't know because you just said it.
Stop it. So, that's the thing. We're just... of that group that thinks, don't write those eras off. There's plenty of great guitars that were made in that era. And like you said, you made a great point too. It's like, it's not like the people in manufacturing were all fired and they got new people. The people that were making the golden era guitars were still in the factories making these other guitars. And again, I really would like to have a guitar made by a human being, shaping, at a station doing this stuff, rather than, you want to talk about bean counter and all this other crap when, it started to become a lot more mechanized and fewer humans were touching the guitars and doing things. So again, there are these people who were making these guitars in the golden era of Fender and Gibson and other manufacturers that were still there after the sale, right? After CBS and after Norlan.
Right.
And so they were diligently doing their best to make good guitars.
And they had to deal with the shit that was coming down from on high. We have to implement this stuff, but they were still touching these instruments. And that's another good point that you brought up is, sure, I mean, we're in like the golden era now of like, computer assisted manufacturing where we can use CNC to cut these things. The problem with that is you're not getting nearly as much quality one-on-one time with the parts as you do. You definitely can see that as you go up. Like if even from the Fender's reissue program, like you have a nice reissue Strat, and compare it to like standard Stratocaster or like the Made in Mexico Stratocaster. And they're good, like even down to the Made in Mexico, they're good, and the neck feels good. But as soon as you jump up to the vintage thing, you can tell somebody had their hand on this with some sort of sandpaper.
Exactly.
And you get to the custom shop, and it's even more, and that's what you get. But that even in these dark eras, you had more of that. I mean, custom shop one-on-one type work on these instruments.
Yeah.
So
as things morphed, exactly, you make a great point that. The guitars, the way they were made, just by virtue of the technology, was that they were made by human beings at a certain station in the factory, right? But as things became more mechanized, let's sell our regular guitars that are made on the machines, but we'll transfer this handmade approach to our custom shop and then charge a shit ton of money so that you're buying a guitar that was made in the custom shop that really would have been a regular guitar off the line in the old days, right? Built by Jack and Susan and whoever's in the those are the names I came up with.
Yeah,
Jack and Susan.
Those are the ones. Their signatures in the body cavity is really desirable.
It is.
You remind me of something.
Of course I did.
One thing. Let's talk about really quickly that era, the dark eras of both of those companies, and let's talk about like innovation.
Yeah. Boom.
Because I think one thing that's often not seen is there was a lot more, probably more innovation back there than there is now. Now what we do is like, okay, we need to come up with a new model to, serve some part of the market. Well, we'll just make a Stratocaster, in Sri Lanka or wherever we can find the cheap labor, and we'll just stamp out this thing that we have.
Yeah.
When back then you actually had teams of like R&D developing models. Like take Fender. I love the Fender's Lead series guitars.
Yep.
And that was actually everything about those, the pickups, the body shape, everything was designed by somebody. And they created this, and that was designed to compete with a lot of the Japanese manufacturers who were delivering great guitars for that money. So you had I think you had more innovation in many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, they did the Bullet series, which was another, started in the USA and then went to Japan. And those two, they had like their own proprietary pickups. And it was kind of people working instead of like, we're just going to take a Strat neck and put a and put a Telecaster body on it, and we're going to call it a new model.
Yeah.
The Tele Deluxe. That was an innovative thing. We had this, I think it was Seth Lover made those pickups, and they came up with a really cool model that was kind of like, we are doing that, where we're taking that Telecaster body and, a Strat neck, but we're going to redesign it and, the electronics and everything. And they came up with a model that stood the test of time.
I totally hear you.
Gibson did some of the same things, some of those ugly things that I happen to like, the Marauder that I mentioned, the S1. I mean, those were like, we were making new models. We have Bill Lawrence on board. He's going to make some pickups for us, and we're going to try these new models. And I could be wrong because I don't have my finger on the pulse of modern Fender and Gibson, but I don't see a lot of that.
Well, I mean, some of the innovation I can recall just from the last 5-10 years are the robotic tuners put on Gibson guitars that seem to have kind of fizzled out.
I hope so.
And the locking tuners on some guitars. But you and I talk about some luthiers that, like, we've seen that acoustic guitar where on the top of the guitar, the strings fan out, and it's almost like a Ronco slice and dicer. Right. It's just silly. Or people who think they've cracked the code, right? This luthier who thinks he's cracked the code on making the perfect guitar. It's like, well, and then you see the guitar that they've created, and it's like, yes, it's this weird body style. Good, nice try, but it doesn't rival even like you say, a 70s Strat or a 70s Gibson Les Paul. These guys they were kind of feeling their way in the early years, which is understandable, but as they got their feet under them and they were building these guitars, they kind of got it right, and all these modern builders, in our view, they're trying to replicate what was done by Leo Fender and McCarty and all these guys back in the early days of making these instruments. And again, there's nothing wrong with trying to make things better or innovate or stuff like that, but many times it seems like those efforts fail because it's like, I see this guitar, I play this guitar. You and I play all these boutique guitars and boutique amps, and we go, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, but how much better is this than this guitar? Or like you're saying, we see the Collings. Collings is they make beautiful guitars, amazing guitars, yeah. But as you said, it's like, okay, well, give me a Gibson Les Paul Jr. and compare it to the Collings.
Or with their flat tops, I do, side by side. I love, Collings does great.
Yeah, they're beautiful
quality.
Guitars, yeah.
That's great. But I still like, their comparable model to a D18. I fall towards the D18, and that's something else is really worth pointing out. Is there's no way of getting around. I mean, guitarists are very traditionalists, and there's a little bit of get off my lawnism with all the shit that I will acknowledge and own.
Right.
But you're never going to get around that. Things like robot tuners, I don't see how that. I mean, that's just like, it just doesn't make any fucking sense. That's like part of the guitar that. To learn to play the instrument, you have to learn to interact with that, and you can't take that element out of there.
Right.
It's just like lazy. You can't fucking do that. Yeah. I mean, and you could say, well, I use 1 million different tunings, so it's really good for instantly. It's like fuck you. I
hope that didn't spike.
Did I say that?
I love it. No, I was saying I hope my cackle didn't spike the thing, but
oh shit, cackle.
Anyway, yeah.
No, whatever. But my whole point is like we're traditionalists. I will always lean towards the classic American guitars.
Yeah.
When you're doing a comparison of, we mentioned Collins or anything like that, and that's just point of reference and opinion.
Right, it is. But again, like I totally agree with that concept that, you know, in the early years of manufacturing, you had it done by human beings, and there were, you know, sure, a human being's not going to be as consistent as some frickin' CNC machine that's crank or a plaque machine. But again, the attention to detail, the attention to quality, putting stuff out was amazing back then during the golden era, and even like we said, even the Norlan era and the dark eras of these guitar manufacturers, you had human beings doing this. And of course, now when you want a custom shop guitar made or anything else, guess what they do? They don't give you this guitar that was made on a machine and shit. They give you this guitar that was, you know, really
made like the guys in the 70s in the Nashville factories.
Yeah, touched by a human being. Right. Exactly. And so that's what you're paying for when you pay $10,000 for a Gibson Les Paul VOS, whatever, blah, 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 burst. You know, some guy in a shop is working away on the shaping the neck and attention to detail and all that other stuff. So that kind of fascinates me about how things have changed, about, you know, and I understand, you know, okay, for mass production, we want to, you know, we're going to crank these things through the factory and, you know, use the machines, but it's just ironic now that if you want a really beautiful great guitar made, you know, it's going to be made by a human being.
I think that's the point.
Or
so
robot.
The dark era, they were still human beings, and you know it warrants repeating. Even though the bean counters came in with their calculators and their pocket protectors,
I hate bean counters.
It was still the same people were making the guitars.
Hank and Susan.
You know,
it wasn't Hank and Susan.
It was Hank and Susan, and it's like, okay, you know, I'm an artist, and now you've kind of bound my hands a little bit by making me, you know, make this pancake guitar, but I'm gonna make it like I made the old ones.
Exactly.
And I'm gonna spend my time.
I'm gonna put love in there, man.
And to just kind of finish up, when we're talking about the dark eras of these, it's totally great to talk about poor quality.
Yeah.
But we have to point to measurable things.
Exactly. Don't point to preferences as quality. Right?
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
And preferences are okay. Everybody has their own preferences. You should. When you decide to become a guitar player, you're going to develop your preferences, and you're going to figure out what you want, and it's completely valid, and you can tell everybody else to fuck off. I don't want a 3-piece maple neck on these Norlan. It doesn't speak to me. I think it has to be the classic mahogany. And we're behind you 100%.
Yep.
But when you say these 3-piece necks are shitty quality,
that's what we have to.
That was designed to save money. When you look at the Super 400 and whatnot, and they have 5-piece necks or whatever, it's like it's not. We're talking. We have to look for measurable things.
Exactly. That's when we take our guitar and beat you over the head with it, like Abby Hoffman got it at Woodstock, because that's a preference. It's not a quality issue. 3 pieces of maple glued together is not. That's gonna last lifetimes in terms of quality.
Right.
That's not gonna fall. Because like I remember you were talking about Waddy Watchell talking about his guitar coming apart in his hands. Well, that was a golden era burst, actually.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't even know what the details were
there.
Yeah. I mean, it might have been the humidity where he was or anything else, but that's not even that quality issue wasn't even a Norlan issue. That was he had a burst that was a classic burst that was kind of having issues. But anyway, that was a side note. But I love the way you wrapped it up. Preferences versus measurable quality issues.
Okay. Well,
that's what we're about.
All right, let's get out of here.
All right. That was another great episode from Chris and Rick Talk Guitars. We're going to get out of here. Do all the cool things we want you to do. Subscribe to our podcast. Go check us out on social media. And until next time, play the guitar.
Sayonara.